Welcome back. Tonight we descend together into the realm most mortals feared to name, where shadows hold dominion and silence reigns eternal. But this is not a tale of evil or cruelty. This is the story of the god who chose the darkness, who found purpose in what others feared. Hades, the unseen one. His very name made ancient Greeks whisper and look away. They feared to draw his attention by speaking it aloud. Before his kingdom of shadows existed, before Olympus rose in glory, the cosmos knew only the reign of Titans. Kronos was their terrible king. Kronos had heard a prophecy that chilled even his immortal heart. His own children would rise to overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his father. So the Titan king devoured each divine child as they were born. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, swallowed into their father's eternal darkness. Young Hades knew only that living prison. Years passed in darkness absolute, consciousness floating in shadow, waiting without knowing what he waited for. In that darkness, Hades learned something his siblings did not. He learned that shadow was not emptiness. It was simply another kind of existence. But Rhea, mother of the gods, saved her youngest child. She hid Zeus away on the island of Crete, letting him grow strong in secret. Zeus returned when he was ready. He forced Kronos to regurgitate his siblings, and from that darkness, the Olympians emerged reborn and ready for war. Hades emerged changed. While his siblings blinked at the light, he understood darkness in ways they never would. Shadow had become his nature. The six divine siblings stood together for the first time in the light. United by shared imprisonment, they prepared to make war upon their father's kind. The Titanomachy. 10 years of cosmic war that shook the foundations of existence. Gods against titans, children against the old order of the world. Hades fought beside his brothers, but differently. He wore the helm of darkness, gift from the Cyclopes, a helm that rendered him completely invisible. Invisible, unseen even by titans, Hades struck from shadows. He learned his true nature in that war, not the warrior, but the one who waits unseen. The Titans fell. Kronos and his kind were cast into Tartarus, the deepest pit of existence, bound in chains forged from the fabric of cosmos itself. Victory demanded division. 3 brothers drew lots for dominion over the cosmos. Zeus claimed the sky, Poseidon the seas, and Hades drew the underworld. Some say he drew the shortest lot. Others whisper that Hades chose the darkness willingly, for he alone among the gods understood that shadow was home. While Zeus ascended to bright Olympus and Poseidon claimed the glittering seas, Hades turned his face downward. He descended alone into the earth. Down through roots of ancient mountains he traveled, past underground rivers that had never known the touch of light, deeper than any god had ventured, into darkness no light had ever touched. Not the darkness of night, which knows the promise of dawn, but the absolute darkness beneath all things. And there Hades found what awaited him. A realm of shadows, formless and churning. The dead wandered here without purpose, without memory, without peace. Countless souls stretched to eternity in every direction. All who had ever died, drifting like leaves in an endless autumn wind. No judgment, no destination. This chaos could not stand. Hades understood what his brothers would never grasp, that death without order was cruelty beyond measure. The dead deserved better. So the god of the dead became the architect of death. He carved rivers through the darkness, creating boundaries where none had existed before. He raised his palace from obsidian and precious gems, a monument to the wealth hidden beneath the earth. Dark, yes, but magnificent in its severity. 5 rivers he established to mark the passages of the dead. The Styx, river of hatred and unbreakable oaths. Even gods feared to break vows sworn upon its waters. The Lethe, river of forgetfulness, where souls could drink and release the weight of mortal memory. The Acheron, river of woe, first passage of the newly dead. The Cocytus, frozen river of lamentation, where the tears of the grieving collected for eternity. And Phlegethon, the river of fire that burned but did not consume. Most importantly, Hades created judgment. Every soul would be weighed, every life measured. Justice even in death. Perhaps especially in death. Can you see it forming? To ferry souls across the Styx, there was Charon. Ancient even then, patient beyond mortal understanding. His boat had carried the first dead and would carry the last. A single coin was his price, an obol placed on the tongue or eyes of the dead. Without payment, souls waited on the shore for 100 years. Guarding the gates of the underworld stood Cerberus, three-headed hound of impossible size, each head watching a different direction. None could sneak past his eternal vigilance. His purpose was simple but absolute. The dead may enter freely. The living may not enter at all, and no one, living or dead, may leave without Hades' permission. Yet to Hades, Cerberus was more than guardian. The three-headed hound loved his master with absolute devotion. In all the underworld, this was Hades' truest companion. Then there was Thanatos, death itself given form, beautiful in a terrible way, with black feathered wings and eyes that held infinite gentleness and absolute inevitability. Thanatos did not kill. He simply collected what was already ending. A guide for the final journey, neither cruel nor kind, simply necessary. Even gods respected his office. His twin brother Hypnos ruled over sleep, gentler still, with wings of silver, gray and poppies woven through his hair. Sleep and death, brothers who walked together. The Furies served a darker purpose. Alecto, Megara, and Tisiphone, the Erinyes born from blood of wounded sky, they pursued those who broke sacred oaths. Oath-breakers, murderers of kin, those who defied sacred hospitality. The Furies hunted them across the mortal world and into the underworld. Their screams were the voices of the wronged. Three mortal kings, renowned for their wisdom and justice in life, became the judges of the dead. Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus sat in eternal judgment. Every soul passed before them. Every life weighed on golden scales. The virtuous sent to peace, the wicked to punishment, the ordinary to gentle forgetting. Perfect fairness eternal. Most souls found their way to the fields of asphodel, endless gray meadows where pale flowers bloomed without sun. Neither punishment nor reward, simply continuation. Here the ordinary dead drifted, their memories fading like morning mist. They forgot their names, their loves, their fears. Only the essence remained, peacefully empty. For most, this was not cruelty but kindness. To remember mortal life forever, with all its loss and longing, would be the true torment. Forgetting was release. But heroes and the blessed earned something greater. Elysium awaited them, paradise of eternal peace, where the worthy found rewards their mortal lives had earned. Eternal feasting in halls of gold, music that stirred the soul, the company of heroes from every age, everything the mortal heart could dream of forever. Great Achilles walked these fields, his rage finally at peace. Wise Odysseus told his tales to audiences who had eternity to listen. Glory without the burden of mortality. And far below everything else, deeper than darkness itself, waited Tartarus. The pit of punishment, the prison of titans, the place where cosmic justice was served. Here the titans were bound in chains, forged from the fabric of existence itself. Kronos and his kind, trapped in the very darkness they once wielded. And here the worst of mortals faced punishments designed for their specific sins. Eternal justice, perfectly fitted to eternal crimes. Hades' law was absolute and fair. Sisyphus, who had tricked death, pushed his boulder up the hill forever. Just before the peak, it always rolled back. His cleverness made eternal and useless. Tantalus, who had served his own son to the gods, stood in water that receded when he drank, beneath fruit that withdrew when he reached. Eternal hunger and thirst. This was Hades' creation, not a realm of cruelty but of order. Every soul received exactly what it deserved, no more, no less. Perfect fairness across eternity. Yet mortals misunderstood him. They saw only death and assumed evil. They feared his name and thought he delighted in their suffering. They could not have been more wrong. Hades took no pleasure in death itself. He did not hunt souls or cause mortals to die. He simply received what came to him, maintaining order in chaos. Every mortal came to him eventually. He could be patient as stone, as inevitable as time. There was no need for haste when eternity stretched before you. Unlike Zeus with his thunderous rages, unlike Poseidon with his crashing storms, Hades was steady. The underworld never changed, and neither did its lord. Constancy was his nature. The wealth of earth belonged to him by right. Every gem, every vein of precious metal, every treasure buried in the ground. Pluto. They sometimes called him the wealthy one. Yet Hades cared nothing for treasure. Gold could not warm his cold halls. Gems could not fill the silence of eternity. Wealth without companionship was merely decoration. He rarely visited Olympus. The bright halls of his siblings felt foreign now, their laughter too loud, their concerns too fleeting. He had become creature of darkness. The other gods avoided his realm. Even Zeus, who ruled all, hesitated to descend. The underworld made even immortals uncomfortable. Death was the one thing gods could not control. Mortals feared even to speak his name. They called him Platon instead, the wealthy one, the rich one, hoping flattery might deflect his attention from their doorsteps. They imagined speaking his true name was invitation, that Hades might hear and come for them sooner. Such was their fear of the unseen one. But Hades watched the mortal world with something other than hunger. He watched because it was alive, and he ruled what came after. Curiosity, perhaps, or longing. The unseen God, surrounded by his faithful servants, master of infinite wealth, judge of all souls, powerful beyond measure, and utterly, completely alone, feel that silence with him. But in the world above, where sunlight blessed the earth, spring danced eternal. Flowers bloomed in colors the underworld would never know. Life flourished in endless celebration. Demeter walked these fields, goddess of the harvest. Where she stepped, wheat grew golden. Where she smiled, orchards bore fruit. She was the blessing of cultivated earth. And Demeter had a daughter, Persephone, though then she was called Cora, simply maiden. She was spring itself given divine form, innocent and impossibly beautiful. Where Persephone walked, flowers bloomed more brightly. Her laughter made birds sing. She was everything the underworld was not, light in life and unbridled joy. She danced through meadows with nymphs as her companions, carefree as only immortal youth can be. The world was bright and death was something that happened to others. Demeter guarded her daughter jealously. Every god on Olympus had noticed Persephone's beauty, and several had asked for her hand. Demeter refused them all. Her daughter was too precious, too pure for the schemes and betrayals of Olympian marriage. Demeter would keep her maiden forever if she could, safe from all harm. But far below, in his palace of shadow, Hades had seen her. Through cracks in the earth, glimpses of the maiden dancing. And something stirred in his ancient heart. He who had felt nothing but duty for ages uncounted. He who ruled death with perfect coldness. Now warmth crept through him, unfamiliar and overwhelming. He wanted. For the first time since creation, the god of the dead felt what mortals call longing. Not for souls or power, but for something impossibly bright. Hades ascended to Olympus, a rare journey. He sought Zeus, his brother, with a request that surprised even the king of gods. He wanted Persephone as his queen. Zeus agreed. Some say carelessly, some say with hidden purpose. Demeter was not consulted. The goddess of harvest would never have given her blessing. Never. In a meadow far from her mother's watchful eyes, Persephone wandered alone. The nymphs had scattered, chasing butterflies. She stooped to pick a narcissus flower, beautiful and strange. The earth split open beneath her feet. A chasm of impossible darkness, and from it rose a chariot of black horses, eyes blazing like underworld fire. Hades stood in that chariot, reaching for her. The Lord of the dead, come for spring itself. His face held no cruelty, only desperate, ancient longing. Persephone screamed. Her cry echoed across the mortal world, carried by the wind, heard by sun and sea. But no one was close enough to help. Down into darkness they plunged. The chariot dove through the closing earth, carrying spring into shadow. Above, flowers withered where Persephone had stood moments before. Demeter felt something tear in her heart. She had been blessing distant fields when the sensation struck her. Her daughter, her core taken. Gone. Lost to darkness. She searched the meadow where Persephone had vanished. Only torn flowers remained, and a crack in the earth already healing. Her daughter had been swallowed by the world. This was not romance. Not yet. This was taking. This was a god claiming what he wanted because he was powerful enough to do so. Persephone had not chosen. She arrived in the underworld as prisoner. The realm of shadow had never seemed darker to her, never more terrible. Everything she was recoiled from this place. Hades offered her a throne beside his own. Queen of the underworld, he promised. Equal in power to himself. But she sat in silence, refusing to speak. Above, the world began to change. Something fundamental had shifted. Spring itself was gone, and the earth felt her absence in every growing thing. This was not the ending. This was only the beginning. For even the darkest stories can transform. Even in the underworld, something new was about to grow. Days passed in the underworld, or perhaps weeks. Time moves strangely in the realm of the dead. Persephone sat in silence, refusing food, refusing to accept her fate. The shades of the dead watched her with something like wonder. They had never seen anything so bright in their realm. A living flower in a garden of stone. Hades did not force her to eat. He did not demand she speak or accept her position. He simply waited, patient as he had always been. Death can afford patience. But he began to show her his kingdom. Not as prison but as responsibility. The weight he carried alone for ages uncounted. The order only he maintained. He took her to the fields of asphodel, where the ordinary dead wandered in peaceful forgetting. She saw not torment but release, souls free from mortal suffering. The shades reached toward her instinctively, drawn to her warmth. Some seemed to remember, for just a moment, what it had felt like to be alive. She was a gift to them. Hades watched her interact with the dead, and something in his expression softened. She was not repulsed by them. She pitied them. She cared. Perhaps she could understand. He showed her Elysium next, paradise of heroes. She saw the blessed dead in their eternal joy, and understood that the underworld was not only darkness. There was light here too. Great heroes approached to bow before her. Achilles himself knelt to the maiden who might become their queen. Even in death, they knew grace when they saw it. She asked Hades why he had created this place. Why reward souls at all when he could simply let them drift? His answer surprised her. Because they earned it, he said simply. Justice is not only punishment. It is giving each soul what their life deserved. Good and ill, measured fairly. He showed her Tartarus then. Carefully, from a distance. The pit of punishment where the worst souls faced eternal consequences. She understood his burden better then. Someone must maintain this, he said. Someone must ensure that evil does not go unanswered. The role is heavy, but it is necessary. Without it, virtue means nothing. Persephone began to see what others could not. Behind the cold god of death was someone carrying an impossible weight. Alone. Always alone. Until now. She found herself asking questions. About the rivers and their purposes. About the judges and their criteria. About Cerberus, who followed them now with wagging serpent tail. The three-headed hound had taken to her immediately. He lay at her feet when she sat, all 6 eyes watching her adoringly. Even monsters could recognize spring. Slowly, so slowly, Persephone's terror transformed into something else. Understanding first, then respect. And beneath that, stirring like seeds in dark soil, something warmer. She created a garden. In a corner of the palace where nothing had ever grown, she willed flowers into existence, pale blooms that needed no sun, life adapted to darkness. Hades found her there, surrounded by impossible blooms. Pale asphodels and ghostly roses, luminescent and strange. Beautiful in ways surface flowers could never be. You brought life here, he said, voice soft with something like awe. No one has ever done that before. In all the ages of my kingdom, nothing has grown. She began to understand then. He had not taken her simply because he could. He had taken her because he was starving. Not for food, but for life itself. The god who ruled death had never truly lived, never laughed freely, never touched anything growing. Until her. She was not prisoner. She was the first warmth in eternal cold. This is still not romance. Not yet. But it is the possibility of romance. Two beings learning to see each other. That is how all true stories begin. She sat on her throne now, choosing to, not forced. She listened as souls were judged, and sometimes offered mercy that Hades had not considered. He listened to her. The queen began to rule beside the king, death tempered by spring, justice softened by compassion. The underworld itself seemed to change, become less cold with her presence. But in the world above, a very different story was unfolding. Demeter's grief had become a weapon. Her sorrow was destroying everything that lived and grew. She wandered the earth in mortal guise, searching endlessly for her lost daughter. 9 days without rest, without food, calling Persephone's name to uncaring skies. She questioned everyone she met, mortals, nymphs, minor gods. None had answers. None had seen where the earth had swallowed her daughter. The secret was kept from her. Finally Helios, the sun who sees all, took pity on her grief. He told her what he had witnessed from his chariot in the sky. The truth at last. Hades has taken your daughter, he said, to be his queen in the underworld. Zeus himself gave permission for the match. Your brother betrayed your trust. Demeter's grief transformed into fury divine. If the gods would take her daughter, she would take everything from them. Let them see what a mother's wrath could do. She withdrew her blessing from the earth, not gradually, but all at once. Every field, every orchard, every garden felt her absence like a wound. The harvest failed everywhere. Wheat that had been golden turned black in the fields. Fruit rotted on the vine. Seeds refused to sprout no matter how desperately mortals planted. Trees that had stood for centuries dropped their leaves and would not grow new ones. Flowers withered and did not return. The world was entering a death from which there would be no spring. This was not natural winter. Winter knows it will end. This was the death of growing things themselves. Demeter's curse upon a world that had allowed her daughter to be stolen. Mortals began to die. The old first, then the weak, then the children. Starvation spread across every land that Greeks had named. The suffering was beyond measure. They prayed to the gods, but what could the gods do? Demeter was the harvest. Without her blessing, nothing they attempted would make food grow. Only she could restore life. Herds perished without fodder. Horses collapsed, cattle fell in fields. The animals that mortals depended upon died one by one, leaving nothing but bones and despair. Demeter felt none of it. Her grief was so consuming that mortal suffering was meaningless noise. She wanted only her daughter. The world could burn if it meant getting Persephone back. A mother's love, twisted by loss, had become the greatest threat the mortal world had ever known. Greater than titans. Greater than monsters. The fury of Demeter was absolute. From Olympus, Zeus watched his world dying. The mortals he ruled were perishing in numbers that threatened to empty the earth. Something had to be done. But more than mortal death concerned him. Without mortals, there would be no worship. Without worship, the gods themselves would fade. Demeter was threatening divine existence. Zeus sent messengers to Demeter, first Iris with her rainbow bridge, then others. Each returned with the same answer. She would not relent. Return her daughter or watch everything die. The king of gods realized he had miscalculated badly. When he gave Persephone to Hades, he had not considered what a mother's love could become when transformed to wrath. He sent for Hermes, swiftest of the gods, messenger between all realms. The winged god would descend to the underworld with a command that could not be refused. Hermes descended through the cracks in the earth, following the path all souls eventually travel. Down past the rivers of the dead, toward the throne of the unseen god. He crossed the Styx without Charon's boat. Gods need no ferryman. He passed Cerberus, who led him through with a growl of recognition. Olympian business in death's realm. Hermes found them together in the throne room. Hades and Persephone, seated side by side. The god of death no longer looked alone. That complicated everything. The messenger spoke Zeus's words. The world above is dying. Demeter will destroy everything unless Persephone returns. This is not request, it is necessity. The cosmos demands balance. Hades sat in silence for a long moment. His kingdom, his queen, everything he had wanted for ages uncounted. Now Zeus demanded he surrender it for the greater good. Persephone watched him. She saw the struggle in his ancient eyes. He could refuse. He was equal to Zeus in power within his own realm. But he would not damn the world for her. She may return, Hades said at last. The words seemed to cost him something vital. I will not hold her against the order of the cosmos. My desire does not outweigh the world. But Persephone did not immediately rise to leave. She looked at Hades, truly looked at him. This god who had taken her, then let her go when it mattered most. Something had changed between them. Not captor and prisoner, not king and possession. Something else. Something that had grown in darkness like her pale flowers. Before she left, Hades offered her one last thing. A pomegranate from his own garden. Food of the underworld, sacred fruit of the dead. Would she eat before her journey? The myths differ on what happened next. Some say Hades tricked her. Some say she knew exactly what she was doing. Some say love makes its own choices. She ate 6 seeds, just 6 small seeds from the fruit of the dead. They tasted like nothing she had ever known. Like shadows and promises and things that do not end. Eating food of the underworld binds you to the underworld. This is law as old as death itself. Even the gods cannot break this bond once it is made. Hermes watched in silence. He understood what had just happened, even if he did not understand why. The messenger would carry more than one message back to Olympus. Persephone rose from her throne at last. She would return to the world above, to sunlight and her mother's arms. But she was no longer quite what she had been. Hades watched her go, and for the first time in his existence, the god of death felt something like hope. She had eaten the seeds. She would return to him. Hermes guided her upward through the passages of death. Past the rivers, past the gates, past the world of shadows. Toward light she had almost forgotten. Behind her the underworld felt colder already. The pale flowers in her garden trembled. Hades sat alone on his throne once more. But now alone had a different meaning. The surface came into view. Persephone emerged from a crack in the earth, and for a moment, she was blinded by the sun. So bright, she had forgotten how bright. Demeter felt her daughter's return like a heartbeat restored. Across the withered world, the goddess of harvest lifted her head. She knew. She ran. Mother and daughter met in a field where nothing grew. Demeter's embrace could have crushed mountains. Tears fell from both of them like rain the earth desperately needed. You're home, Demeter whispered through her tears. You're safe. I will never let anyone take you again. A mother's promise, absolute and fierce and blind to complexity. The earth responded to Demeter's joy. Green spread from where they stood. Flowers erupted from dead soil. The world remembered how to live because the goddess remembered how to bless. Within hours the world transformed. Fields that had been black with death turned green with new growth. Trees budded. Flowers opened. Life returned like a held breath finally released. Mortals wept with relief. They fell to their knees in fields suddenly alive with grain. Children laughed again. The world had been spared at the last possible moment. But then Demeter looked closely at her daughter. Really looked. And she saw the change. Something darker woven through Persephone's brightness. Something that had not been there before. What is that darkness in you? Demeter asked, voice trembling. What did he do to you? But Persephone's answer was not what she expected or feared. I ate of the pomegranate, Persephone said quietly. 6 seeds. I am bound to the underworld now, mother. Part of me belongs to the darkness forever. Demeter's scream shook Olympus itself. The joy she had felt moments before twisted into renewed fury. She had won her daughter back, only to learn she could never truly have her. The goddess would have destroyed the world again. would have let everything die rather than accept this half measure. But Zeus intervened, finally taking responsibility for what he had caused. 6 seeds, Zeus declared. 6 months then. Persephone will spend half the year with Hades as queen of the underworld. Half the year she returns to her mother. This is the balance. The laws of the dead cannot be broken, even by the king of gods. But they can be balanced. Compromise is not defeat. It is how opposing forces coexist. Demeter raged. She pleaded. She threatened. But even her fury could not unmake what had been done. Her daughter had eaten the food of the dead. The bond was unbreakable. Finally, exhausted, Demeter accepted what she could not change. 6 months with her daughter. 6 months without. It was more than she had feared, less than she had wanted. And so the seasons were born. Not from the motion of stars or the will of any god, but from a mother's grief and a daughter's choice. When Persephone walks with her mother, the world blooms. Spring returns, flowers open, life flourishes. Demeter's joy makes the earth generous and warm. Summer follows spring's promise. The world reaches its fullness under Demeter's satisfied smile. Her daughter is near and everything grows in abundance. But as the time approaches for Persephone's return to the underworld, autumn comes. Demeter's anticipatory grief paints the leaves with fire and gold, beautiful but ending. And when Persephone descends to join her husband in the dark, winter falls. Demeter withdraws her blessing, mourning her daughter's absence with cold and dormancy. But winter is not death. It is waiting. Beneath the frozen soil, seeds dream of spring. And in the underworld, Persephone rules as queen beside her king. The first time Persephone descended willingly, Hades waited at the gates of his realm. Not as captor now, but as something else. Something like a husband who missed his wife. She came to him through the darkness, and when their hands touched, the underworld itself seemed less cold. Death and spring, together by choice at last. Above, Demeter let the world grow cold. She would mourn her daughter's absence every winter, until the end of time, but she knew now, spring would always come again. This is why seasons turn. This is why winter comes and goes. A compromise between death and life. Forged from love and loss, and the unbreakable bonds of family. And for Hades, the unseen god, eternity finally had a rhythm. 6 months of loneliness, yes, but 6 months with his queen. For the first time, he understood hope. Years flowed like the rivers of the underworld. Steady, eternal, measured by the rhythm of Persephone's coming and going. Hades had found contentment he never imagined possible. When she was with him, the underworld knew something like warmth. Her garden expanded, pale flowers blooming in impossible colors. Even the shades seemed less lost in her presence. When she departed for the world above, Hades waited with patience born of certainty. She would return. The seasons would turn. This was their eternal dance now. Together they ruled the underworld with justice and something approaching mercy. Death had become less cold under their shared hand. Souls feared less what awaited them. The dead came in endless streams, as they always had and always would. Each received their judgment. Each found their place. The order Hades had built remained perfect. But in the world above, mortals watched Persephone return from death each spring. They saw the queen of the underworld walk among flowers again, and they began to wonder. If a goddess could descend to death and return, why not a mortal? If Persephone could walk between worlds, perhaps the boundary was not so absolute after all. The old acceptance of death began to crack. Heroes dreamed of rescuing loved ones from the underworld. Clever men schemed to cheat what had always been inevitable. Hades felt this shift like a tremor in his realm. The walls between life and death, which had always been absolute, were being tested. His order was being questioned. The first true challenge came from the king of Corinth. Sisyphus. Clever, cruel, and utterly without reverence for the gods, he had cheated everyone in life. Now he would try to cheat death. When Thanatos came for Sisyphus at last, the king was ready. He had prepared for this moment with the same cunning he had used to build his fortune. "Those are beautiful chains," Sisyphus said, admiring the bonds Thanatos carried for souls. "Divine craftsmanship. Tell me, how do they work? Show me their mechanism." Death had never been flattered before. Thanatos, who dealt only in endings, had never faced such clever misdirection. He demonstrated the chains, and Sisyphus struck. In an instant, Death was bound in his own chains. Thanatos, who had collected every mortal soul since time began, found himself imprisoned by a single clever king. With Death enchained, no one could die. Sisyphus had broken the most fundamental law of existence, and the consequences spread across the entire mortal world. The old and sick could not find peace. They lingered in agony, praying for an end that would not come. Bodies failed but souls could not depart. Warriors fell in battle but could not die. They lay in fields with terrible wounds, screaming for release. War became something worse than slaughter, eternal suffering. Eris, god of war, felt his domain becoming meaningless. What glory was there in battle if no one could achieve the warrior's final honor? He acted where others hesitated. The war god found Thanatos and broke his chains with divine strength. Death was freed, and immediately set about collecting every soul that had been denied passage. Sisyphus was dragged to the underworld at last. But the cunning king had prepared for this too. Even in death, he had one more trick to play. Before Thanatos took him, Sisyphus had instructed his wife to leave his body unburied. No coins on his eyes, no proper funeral rites, a deliberate violation of sacred custom. When Sisyphus stood before Hades in the throne room of the dead, he did not beg or plead. He complained, loudly, about the disrespect shown to his corpse. "My wife has dishonored me," Sisyphus declared. "She left my body to rot without burial. Let me return to the living world, just briefly, to arrange proper rites. Then I will come back willingly." Hades was bound by his own laws. Proper burial was sacred. The dead deserved funeral rites. Against his better judgment, against Persephone's whispered warning, he agreed. Sisyphus returned to the living world, and he laughed. He had no intention of arranging his burial or returning to the underworld. He had tricked death twice. He lived on year after year, growing old but not dying. Every day was stolen time, every breath a mockery of divine law. Sisyphus had beaten death itself. In the underworld, Hades realized his mistake. The god who prided himself on perfect justice had been deceived by a mortal. His law had been used against him. Persephone had warned him. She had seen the trick in Sisyphus's eyes. But Hades had been too bound by his principles to see the manipulation. Now he would correct his error. This time Hades did not send Thanatos. He sent something Sisyphus could not charm or trick. He sent the Furies themselves, the inescapable avengers of broken oaths. Sisyphus was dragged back to the underworld screaming. And this time, Hades had prepared a punishment that would last for all eternity. Cleverness would be made meaningless forever. Sisyphus stood before Hades once more, but this time there would be no clever arguments, no appeals to sacred custom. The god of death had learned from his mistake. "You tricked me once with words," Hades said, voice cold as the deepest caverns of his realm. "Your punishment will make words meaningless. Your cleverness will avail you nothing." A boulder was brought before Sisyphus. Massive, rough-hewn, impossibly heavy. And beyond it, a hill that seemed to stretch upward forever into the darkness of Tartarus. "Your task is simple," Hades explained. "Roll the boulder to the top of the hill. When you reach the summit, you will be free." The simplest of labors. Sisyphus almost smiled. He had moved mountains with his schemes. He had tricked death itself. What was one boulder to a man of his capabilities? He set his shoulder against the stone and pushed. It moved, slowly, grudgingly, but it moved. Step by step, he forced it up the slope. Progress. He was making progress. Hours passed, or what felt like hours in the timeless underworld. The boulder rose higher. The summit seemed closer. Sisyphus allowed himself to hope. His muscles burned. His feet slipped on loose stones. But he was almost there. So close to the top he could see the edge where the hill ended. And then, Just before his hands could guide the stone over the crest, it slipped from his grasp. He felt the weight shift, the momentum reverse. The boulder rolled back down the hill. All his effort, all his straining, all his progress, erased in moments. It came to rest exactly where it had started. Sisyphus stood at the top of the empty hill, gasping for breath, staring down at the boulder far below. He would have to start again. He walked down slowly. He pushed again, rose again, and again just before the summit, the boulder escaped him. Again and again and again. This was his eternity. No trick could help him now. No clever words could lighten the stone. No scheme could change the angle of the hill. His brilliance was perfectly, eternally useless. This was Hades' justice. The punishment fit the crime with perfect precision. Sisyphus had tried to roll back death itself. Now he would roll forever and achieve nothing. Other mortals learned from Sisyphus's fate. They whispered warnings to their children. Do not try to cheat death. The Lord of the underworld is patient, but his justice is eternal. But not everyone who challenged Hades' realm did so through trickery. Some came with something purer. Something even the god of death could respect. Love. Orpheus was the greatest musician who ever lived. His lyre could make rivers pause in their flowing. His voice could make stones weep with longing. He loved Eurydice with a love poets would sing of for ages. She was his inspiration, his audience, his everything. They married on a day of perfect happiness. But happiness in Greek myths is fragile. On their wedding day, as Eurydice danced through a meadow, a serpent struck. Venom stopped her heart before she could scream. Orpheus found her lying among flowers, already still, already cold. His scream echoed across the mortal world. The greatest voice ever known made only the sound of breaking. He tried to play for her, as if music could call her back. His lyre made sounds that had never been heard before. Pure grief given melody, but she did not wake. Other mortals would have accepted fate, would have mourned and eventually moved forward. But Orpheus was no ordinary mortal. His love would not let him surrender. He would go to the underworld itself. He would find Hades on his throne and ask, no beg, for Eurydice's return. What he lacked in cunning, he would make up in love. The cave swallowed him. Darkness surrounded him completely. But Orpheus began to play, and his music created light where none had been. Sound became his torch. He reached the river Styx, where Charon waited in his eternal boat. The ferryman looked at this living man with something approaching confusion. No living soul belonged here. Orpheus played for Charon. The ancient ferryman had heard nothing but the silence of souls for countless ages. Now music washed over him like forgotten warmth. Without a word, without demanding the coin he always required, Charon gestured Orpheus aboard. The boat carried them across the black water while music filled the silence. At the gates, Cerberus waited, 3 heads raised, teeth bared. No living being had ever passed the guardian willingly. But Orpheus played, and all 3 heads lowered. The 3-headed hound lay down like a puppy, all 6 eyes closing in peace. Music had done what no weapon could. Past the guardian of the dead without violence. Through the fields of asphodel Orpheus walked, playing his grief made melody. The shades gathered around him, drawn to the music like moths to flame. For a moment, for just a moment, the dead remembered what it felt like to love, what it felt like to lose. Their forgotten emotions stirred like embers. Even the Furies paused in their eternal pursuit of the guilty. Alecto, Megara, and Tisiphone, who knew only vengeance, found tears streaming from their blood-red eyes. In Tartarus, the punishments paused. Sisyphus stopped pushing his boulder to listen. The stone stayed in place, held by the power of music where it never stayed for him. Tantalus forgot his hunger and thirst. The water did not recede, the fruit did not withdraw. For one moment music gave him peace that punishment had denied. Orpheus came at last to the throne room of the underworld. Hades and Persephone sat in their places of power, watching this mortal approach with his impossible request. Orpheus did not speak. Words would have been insufficient. Instead he played. He played his love for Eurydice, from first meeting to final loss. He played their wedding day, the flowers in her hair. He played the serpent's strike, the moment his world ended. He played the emptiness that followed, too vast for words. He played his journey into darkness, his hope against all reason, his willingness to face any trial for one more moment with her. Love as music, music as prayer. Persephone wept openly. She who knew what it meant to be taken from the world above, who understood love tested by darkness. Her heart broke for this mortal man. Even Hades, who had felt nothing for ages, found something stirring in his ancient heart. Not the hardness he had shown Sisyphus. Something softer. Something like understanding. This was not trickery. This was not scheme or manipulation. This was a man who loved so deeply he had walked into death itself on nothing but hope and song. Hades looked at Persephone. She looked back at him. In that glance past understanding that needed no words. They had found each other in darkness. They knew what love could mean. "You may take her," Hades said at last. His voice was rough, unused to speaking such words. "Eurydice may return with you to the world above." Orpheus's face transformed with joy he had never expected to feel again. He fell to his knees in gratitude, unable to speak, tears streaming freely. "But there is a condition," Hades continued. Orpheus looked up, hope and fear mingling. Of course there was a condition. Even mercy in the underworld had rules. "Eurydice will follow you back to the surface. But you must not look back at her until you both stand in sunlight. If you look back, she returns to death forever. Trust that she follows. Trust in your love, in my word, in the bond between you. Reach the surface without looking back, and she is yours again." Orpheus agreed. How could he not? He would have agreed to anything. His wife would follow him home. He needed only to trust, only to not look back. Eurydice was brought forth. Her shade was more substantial than others, prepared for the journey back to life. She saw Orpheus and reached for him. He could not touch her, not yet. Not until they reached sunlight. Orpheus turned away from his wife and began the long walk toward life, trusting she followed. Step by step, they climbed through the underworld. Orpheus played softly as he walked, letting the music be the thread connecting them. She was there. She had to be there. Past the silent shades of asphodel they walked. Past Cerberus, who let them pass without stirring. Past Charon, who watched from his boat with something like hope. The path wound upward through darkness absolute. Orpheus could not hear her footsteps. Shades make no sound. He could only trust that she was there, following almost alive. The doubt crept in slowly. What if Hades had tricked him? What if she was not really there? What if this was all punishment for his arrogance in coming here? He could hear nothing behind him. Feel nothing. Only darkness and silence and the terrible uncertainty of whether he was walking alone or with his love. Light appeared ahead, faint at first, then growing. The surface. The world above, sunlight after darkness. They were almost there, almost safe, almost together again. A few more steps. That was all. A few more steps and he could turn and take her in his arms and never let go. So close. So impossibly close. But the doubt was too strong. The need to know was overwhelming. What if she vanished the moment he stepped into light? What if this was all illusion? At the very edge of the light, one step from salvation, Orpheus turned. He looked back. He had to see. He had to know. Eurydice was there. Right there, reaching for him, so close he could almost touch her. Their eyes met. Love and horror mingled in her gaze. She was already fading. The moment his eyes found her, the magic broke. She dissolved like morning mist. Pulled back into the darkness that would hold her forever. Her last word was his name. Just his name, spoken with infinite love and infinite sorrow. Then she was gone, and the silence was absolute. Orpheus screamed after her. He threw himself back toward the darkness, but the way was closed. One chance, Hades had said. He had spent it. He stayed at that threshold for days, singing songs of grief that made the very stones weep. But no second chance came. Death had given him mercy once, that was all. This is Hades' law. Compassion has limits. Rules cannot be broken even by the purest love. Even the god who was moved by music could not bend death twice. Orpheus wandered the world after that, singing only sorrow. No joy ever touched his music again, until death reunited him with Eurydice in Elysium at last. But even in tragedy, Hades had shown his nature. He had been moved by love. He had given a chance where no chance was owed. Death is not without heart. Sisyphus was punished for trickery. Orpheus was given chance because of love. But one more mortal would test Hades' realm. Not with cunning or love, but with strength divine. Heracles, greatest of all heroes, came to the underworld not to rescue a loved one, but under command. His final labor: capture Cerberus and bring him to the surface. Son of Zeus himself, Heracles bore a mortal blood in mortal frame. He had performed 11 impossible labors. This 12th would take him into death itself. The shades fled before him. A living man of such power had never walked among them. His vitality was almost painful to their faded forms. He came before Hades' throne, and unlike Sisyphus with his schemes or Orpheus with his songs, Heracles made no pretense. He stated his purpose plainly. "I am commanded to take your hound to the surface," Heracles declared. "Not forever. I will return him. But this labor I must complete." Hades could have refused. Within his own realm, even Zeus's son had no power to compel him. But the god of death saw something in this hero worth respecting. "You may attempt to take Cerberus," Hades said, "but you must use no weapons. Cause him no lasting harm. And you must return him when your labor is proven." Heracles agreed. He set aside his club and his arrows, wearing only his lion skin. He approached the three-headed guardian with nothing but his divine, born strength. Cerberus rose to his full terrible height. 3 heads snarled. Serpent tail lashed. Here was no musician to soothe him, no trickster to deceive, only a challenger to fight. They crashed together like titans. Heracles wrapped his arms around the great hound, muscles straining against muscles. 3 heads snapped at him, but he held on. The battle shook the underworld. Stones fell from cavern ceilings. Shades scattered in terror. But slowly, impossibly, Heracles began to gain advantage. He had strength born of Zeus himself. Not mortal strength, not entirely. Divine power flowed through him, and he used it now to subdue the guardian of death. Cerberus fell. All 3 heads lowered in submission. The hound that had never been bested recognized superior strength. Heracles had won, without weapons, without lasting harm. Hades watched, and he was impressed. This was how a hero should challenge the underworld, with strength and honor, respecting the rules, earning victory through merit. Heracles led Cerberus to the surface. The 3-headed hound saw sunlight for the first and only time. Where his drool fell on earth, poisonous aconite flowers grew. His labor proven, Heracles returned Cerberus as promised. The faithful hound raced back to his master, all 3 heads eager to be home in the dark. 3 mortals had tested Hades' realm. The trickster was punished eternally. The lover was given mercy that he could not maintain. The hero was allowed to succeed with honor. This is who Hades is. Not cruel, not evil, not the villain mortals imagined. He is justice itself. Impartial, fair, giving exactly what each soul deserves. Those who try to cheat death find eternal punishment. Those who come with love find compassion tempered by law. Those who come with honor find respect. The unseen God maintains the order without which existence would collapse. He takes no pleasure in death, seeks no worship, demands only what is already inevitable. And beside him his queen rules as equal. Persephone brings life to death's realm, compassion to judgment, spring to eternal shadow. Together they are balance itself. This is the true story of Hades. Not monster but guardian. Not villain but necessary. The unseen ruler who keeps the cosmos in order while the rest of us live. We have walked with Hades through his realm. We have seen his justice, his loneliness, his unexpected capacity for love. But what did this god mean to those who first told his tales? The ancient Greeks did not worship Hades as they worshipped Zeus or Athena. No great temples rose in his honor. No festivals celebrated his name with joy. They feared him, yes. But their fear was not hatred. It was the reasonable caution all mortals feel toward what cannot be avoided. Death comes for everyone. Hades was not a devil in the way later religions would imagine. Greek mythology had no devil, no embodiment of pure evil. The gods were complex, not divided into simple good and evil. He was simply the god of what comes after, the lord of the inevitable. Every breath mortals drew was borrowed time, and Hades was the one to whom it would be returned. The Greeks understood something we often forget, that death gives life its meaning. Without ending, what would beginning matter? Without loss, what would love cost? Glory only matters because the hero will die. Love only cuts so deep because lovers will part. Every mortal joy is sharpened by the knowledge that it cannot last. Hades was the god who made all of that real. Without him, without death, mortals would drift through existence without urgency, without passion, without meaning. His fairness mattered too. The Greeks believed that death was the great equalizer. King and slave, hero and coward, all would stand before the same judges in the end. This gave the oppressed hope. The cruel master who escaped mortal justice would face divine judgment. The virtuous slave might find Elysium, while the tyrant found Tartarus. They called him Plauton, the wealthy one, because all the riches of the earth belonged to him. Every gem, every vein of gold, every buried treasure. This was not mere metaphor. The Greeks understood that what we bury returns to the god of the buried. Wealth and death are connected beneath our feet. Now let us look at the symbols in Hades' myths. Each element carries meaning the ancient storytellers wove with purpose. The pomegranate, for instance. The pomegranate is full of seeds, symbol of fertility, of life itself. Yet eating it binds Persephone to death. Life and death are not opposites, but intertwined. 6 seeds, 6 months below. The number is not random. 6 is half, balance between 2 worlds, 2 states of being, 2 parts of Persephone's nature. Cerberus, the 3-headed guardian. Why 3 heads? Some say past, present, and future, all time watching the gates of death. Others say birth, life. Death, the 3 stages all souls pass through. He lets souls in but not out. The boundary he guards is one way for mortals. This is the nature of time itself. We move through it in one direction only. The rivers carry meaning too, Styx, hatred and binding oaths. Even gods feared to break vows sworn upon it. Some commitments are stronger than death itself. Lethe, forgetfulness. The dead drink and forget mortal life. This is not cruelty but mercy. To remember forever would be to suffer forever. Letting go is release. The helm of darkness that makes Hades invisible speaks to death's nature. We do not see death coming. It is always unseen until it arrives. Persephone's transformation carries perhaps the deepest meaning. She was spring, innocent, bright, untouched by shadow. Then she became queen of death as well. She did not stop being spring. She became both. Life and death united in one being. This is what the Greeks understood that we sometimes forget. Life contains death. Death contains the seed of new life. The seasons prove this every year. What dies in winter returns in spring. Ending is also beginning. Demeter's grief gave us winter. A mother's loss made the world grow cold. This too carries truth. Love and grief are inseparable. To love is to know you will mourn. What universal truths emerge from Hades' mythology? First, that death is not evil. It is necessary. Without it, life loses all urgency and meaning. Second, that justice exists beyond this life. The Greeks believed our actions matter eternally. What we do echoes in the underworld long after we are gone. Third, that love can transform even the darkest places. Hades' realm became less cold, because Persephone brought spring with her. Love changes what it touches. Fourth, that we must accept what we cannot change. Demeter raged against her daughter's fate, but ultimately accepted the compromise. Fighting the inevitable brings only suffering. Finally, that even gods are bound by laws they cannot break. Hades rules death but does not control it. There are forces older and deeper than any god. These truths have traveled through thousands of years to reach us tonight. The Greeks gave fear a face, and in doing so, made death something we can understand. Stories do not stay still. They travel through time, changing with each teller, each age, each culture that adopts them. Hades' story has journeyed further than most. When Rome conquered Greece, they adopted its gods and gave them new names. Hades became Pluto, from the Greek Plauton, meaning wealth, the lord of underground riches. Romans emphasized his wealth more than Greeks had. All treasure buried in earth belonged to him: mines, gems, gold veins. Pluto was patron of what darkness hid. But as Christianity spread, the concept of afterlife transformed dramatically. The neutral asphodel vanished. Heaven and hell replaced the graduated underworld with absolute judgment. Hades was never evil, but the medieval mind needed a devil. Over centuries, the somber lord of the dead was conflated with Satan. Horns and flames added where none had been. Yet poets knew better. Dante, writing his Inferno, borrowed the geography of the Greek underworld. His circles of hell echoed Tartarus. His rivers recalled the Styx and Acheron. Milton's Paradise Lost drew from the same well. His fallen angels in their dark kingdom owed something to Titans bound in Tartarus. Ancient myths shaped Christian poetry. The Victorians rediscovered Persephone with passionate intensity. Pre-Raphaelite painters captured her descent and return again and again. The maiden with pomegranate, poised between worlds. They saw in her story something modern. A woman's autonomy challenged, transformed, ultimately finding power in darkness. The myth spoke to their age as it had spoken to ancients. The 20th century brought new interpretations. Psychologists saw in Persephone's descent a metaphor for the journey into the unconscious, the underworld within each of us. Today, Hades appears everywhere we look. Video games cast him as final boss or complex ally. His realm becomes levels to conquer, his trials challenges to overcome. Novels reimagine the Hades and Persephone romance endlessly. Writers explore consent, power, transformation, finding new questions in the ancient story of death and spring. Films and television return to the underworld again and again. Each generation creates its own Hades. Sometimes villain, sometimes misunderstood, always fascinating in his darkness. Even our science carries his name. The distant dwarf planet Pluto, named for the Roman god of the underworld, orbits in darkness at the edge of our solar system. The element plutonium, discovered in the atomic age, bears his name as well. Power extracted from darkness, dangerous and transformative, fitting for the lord of hidden wealth. Why does Hades endure when other gods have faded from common knowledge? Perhaps because death itself endures. The question he represents never becomes irrelevant. Every generation must face mortality. Every culture must explain what happens after. And in Hades, they find a story flexible enough to hold their fears and hopes. The unseen god remains visible in our imagination. 3,000 years after Greeks first whispered his name, we are still telling his story. We are telling it now. And so we come to the end of our journey through the realm of shadows. We have walked where mortals fear to tread, and we have returned safely to the light. Tonight we met the unseen god. We saw him born in darkness, freed by his brother, choosing the realm that matched his nature. We saw him build order from chaos. We witnessed his love for spring's maiden, and how their story gave us the turning of the seasons. Death and life, intertwined forever in an eternal dance. We watched as mortals tested his realm. The trickster who was punished. The lover who was given impossible hope. The hero who earned respect through strength and honor. Hades is not the villain stories sometimes make him. He is the necessary god. The one who keeps the balance. The one who waits for all of us with patience and fairness. His story has traveled 3,000 years to reach us tonight. From ancient Greek fires to Roman temples, to medieval manuscripts to the screen in front of you now. Think of all the voices that have told this tale before. Grandparents to children, poets to audiences, priests to worshippers. We join a chain that stretches back to the beginning of stories. The ancient Greeks gave death a face so they could look at it. They gave it rules so they could understand it. They gave it a story so they could live with it. We honor them tonight. Those unknown voices who first whispered of Hades in firelight, making the darkness a little less frightening, the mystery a little more bearable. Now let the underworld fade from your mind. Let the rivers and the shades and the dark throne room drift away like morning mist. You are safe in the world of light. Rest now, knowing that even death has order, that fairness waits at the end of all roads, that the unseen God is patient, and your time in the light is yours to use well. Sleep peacefully. Hades watches over his realm, and Persephone will bring spring again. Until next time we journey together through ancient tales. Rest well. Good night.